So I wanted to do this video because people aren't reading enough fiction, especially men, especially black men. You got to read more fiction. Expand your mind, your imagination. And imagination is like the most important tool that we have. And all when you think you want to do this manifesting, you want to control your own life, you have to be able to imagine it. Not specifically, but don't limit yourself. There's a saying, reach for the moon, so if you fall, you'll be among the stars, which if you're more literal, you know how much further stars are than the moon. But if you're anywhere in space, you're among the stars. So the point is, you have to be able to imagine it. Imagine out farther. You should have unrealistic goals, unachievable goals. Um, that can help you in life. So I've been reading some fiction, and I want to encourage fiction reading. And as a black man, a lot of times there's an impetus and maybe even a feeling of an obligation to read black writers, which I also do, not exclusively. This month I actually had more black writers than I thought. When I look at but it's a variety of literature. So I just want to share this with you, and other people share with me what you've read. We'll go like that. So I read this book, Dome Child, which is like a futuristic AI. I've been reading a lot of science fiction, AI kind of things. This was an okay book. I really like some of the concepts. That's really what kept it going. Is like the world building. I think the author is British, and there were just some sensibility things with the characters that I didn't love. That was a little harder for me to maintain, like my interest in. But the world building was strong, so I was able to finish it. Um, but it is clearly like the beginning of a trilogy, and it doesn't really have an ending. You're like, these conflicts aren't resolved. It ends on a cliffhanger, and there's no sequel. So I would probably at least read the second one if he wrote one. So it's definitely worth checking out. Read the synopsis if it strikes you. Then I read Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Man, this is like a Hunger Games style book, or in terms of what it's about. Brutal, man. So the world is divided up. People are divided into colors. Not like what we know, but colors like gold, obsidian, red. I think like the book, their skin is made this color. Anyway, maybe not. Maybe it's just you just are this color. But either way, um, it's in a future world, and people, somebody from the lowest color is genetically modified to fit in with the highest color to try to um, change the plight of his people. But man, it's really hard to explain because it just goes so crazy. He goes to the school for these golden kids. Gold is the highest color, and they have to like survive for a year, and it's just, man, the things these kids do to each other. But that's how brutal this society is. Highly recommend if you're a Hunger Games fan. Highly recommend. So then I read the second book, Golden Sun. This was all recommended to me from a friend. It was recommended to him from his girlfriend, and he was like, "Oh, I don't want to read it." Then he read it, and then he recommended it to me. The second one leaves that wilderness situation that the kids are in and brings them into the real world, where it's even more brutal because now they're dealing with real adults and there's other stakes. Man, it's not for the faint of heart, but if you like that kind of sci-fi, what else was it? It was Hunger Games. It was what other movie was like that? The young adult, kind of intense, fighting for the future. But anyway, it's in that vein. It's a great trilogy. There's like 6 or 7 books total because he does a trilogy, then he jumps ahead a bunch of years. So I just stopped at the second book. It was like too much for me, too intense. I needed to move on to something else, a little less, like a different kind of, yeah, a little less violent. But then I read Scythe. So Don't Child was by Shiv Ramdas, Indian man, I believe. Golden Sun and Red Rising were by Pierce Brown, a white man. Then I read Scythe by Neil Schusterman, who I believe is a black man. I love Scythe. Loved it. It's about this future world where we've basically solved death. People don't have to die. Everything can be healed. People can be fixed. And whenever you want to, you can reset back to a younger age. So if you're like, 60, you can reset to 30, or you can reset to 30 every 10 years, so you can always be young. But there's a class of people called Scythe. I say Scythe. I'm not going to keep saying Scythe. And they are in charge of maintaining the population. They kill people. It's like ordained. And they have a code that they have to follow. So it follows these two kids who are becoming new Scythe. So they have to learn how to kill and be indoctrinated into this society. But now, so in a society where death has been figured out, like if you die, you can be brought back to life unless you're killed by a Scythe. Then that's like final death. You're actually dead. It's like a form of population control. And I think there's also like a psychological control thing. But the world is run by the Thunderhead. The Thunderhead is like super advanced AI. It went from the cloud to the Thunderhead. So everything is really run by the Thunderhead. And that's how the world like maintains order. It was great. It was great writing. It kept me on the edge of my seat. I read that whole trilogy. Scythe, Thunderhead, and The Toll. Those are the names of the books. Highly, highly recommend. Love this series. There's one more book that's kind of like an offshoot that I'm going to read eventually. But Neil Schusterman, my man. Then I read James, a novel by Percival Everett about Negro Jim, who was the slave of the family of Huckleberry Finn in the Huckleberry Finn book. So it's like taking that Huck Finn story and telling it from a different perspective. So for the first two chapters, I was like, what is happening? It's just like a slave book. Then it flips and literally in chapter 3. And I was like, here's a commentary. Here's what it's about. I don't want to give it away, but I kind of do. I guess I'm not going to. But maybe this doesn't need to be spoiler free. But this is also a new book. This was released last year. So I don't want to give it away, but worth reading. A different look at that period of time. And I think it really lays bare how differently life was for black men and white men at that time. Like more so than a lot of books I've read, or even a lot of like factual things from that time. It's like the terror that you live with as a black man. And that's what I read in January of this year. Even in my more heavy reading times, wouldn't read 4 or 5 books a month, but I was really driven to do that. And try to keep it up. Try to keep up 3 or 4 books a month right now throughout this year. Just because I want to, and I found a way to do it. I have a 1-year-old, but I'm reading on my phone on the Kindle app, which some people could, poo-poo at. I love to have a physical book, but right now, having a physical book and carrying a light, and the baby sleeping unpredictable, though she does sleep at night. Give her credit for that. She'll sleep through the night, and I can just lay in bed and read. It's more about the reading, less about how it's done right now. And also, we don't have a lot of space in this house. So if I was buying 3 or 4 books a month or trying to keep them around the house, there's of course the library, which I will utilize. But right now, I'm on the Kindle, getting through some of these books. So, like I said, I just encourage people to read more fiction. And really expand your mind, expand your creativity and imagination. And imagination isn't all about like fairies and dragons. It's everything. It's everything. How you can envision your life changing and being better. That's your imagination. So I was really feeling like this is something I wanted to share. Wanted to share these books. I didn't feel like editing the video too much, so I just laid the titles of the book out and you can go look them up. It's a minimal amount of work. Let's just do a little bit. Share with me if you see this. Books that you've read recently you really like, maybe I'll check them out. Oh yeah, about James. So Percival Everett wrote a book called Erasure. Erasure became the movie American Fiction, which just won an Oscar for Best Screenplay, Adapted Screenplay last year, by Corey Jefferson. So if that influenced you to check out that book, great. In other words, in other terms, that's all I got.